What is good, everyone? Quick hit video. I want to talk about the hottest name right now in the fantasy space, in the dynasty space, Jonathan Taylor. This is going to be the Jonathan Taylor conundrum, trying to figure out what to do with Jonathan Taylor in your dynasty leagues. If you're holding him, you're relying on him, you've built a running back room around him, and now you're wondering, what should I do with him going forward? So just a quick update on the news. You can follow the timeline out there as to what happened. Essentially, we are at a stalemate point now where Jonathan Taylor has requested a trade. Initially, it was reported that he had a back injury. He's come out and said he doesn't have a back injury. The Colts have said they are not trading him. But they have also said they are not going to give him a contract extension. So it's in this weird spot now where if you have Jonathan Taylor, obviously he has to play 6 games or be active on the roster for at least 6 games to accrue a year, which is what he wants so that he can hit free agency next year, or at least accrue a season so he is that much closer to free agency. But you also have to wonder, what is his motivation to do more than that? I assume, just my forecasting, he is going to return. He has to. He's due $4.3 million this year. He can't not get paid that money, and he has to accrue a season so he can move closer to being able to get out of Indianapolis, the freeway, without a trade, without being cut. And it seems like the Colts' heels are dug in. They're not going to accommodate any wishes that he has to leave town until he is allowed to go based on the terms of his contract. So he's going to have to come back. He's going to have to play. But is he going to be available for the fantasy playoffs? That's the biggest thing. Now, it's a risk for any running back to be available for the fantasy playoffs. It's a long way away. Week 16, week 17, whatever it's set up in your league, that's a long way away. A lot of running backs you're counting on at the beginning of the year won't be available. That's why you structure your teams in a way where you can take advantage of that fact. It's why you go really heavy running back. That's why you backfill with any running back on a 53. But you now have to wonder, what motivation does Jonathan Taylor have to give the team anything past the minimum? If the team isn't good, what motivation does he have to play for a losing team? That's another risk with some of these guys with contract disputes. If they're on a contender, if they're on a playoff team, you have to think those guys are going to be more apt to show up and play when the games matter. But if the team's under 500, if they're not competing, why on earth would a running back who has such a small window risk anything in the future for a team that's not going anywhere? So you have to ponder that as well. If you think the Colts are going to be a playoff team, then maybe there's an outside shot. But if they're going to be a 500 team, a team that's under 500, there's almost no chance that I think Jonathan Taylor is there playing when it matters most. So just a little background on Jonathan Taylor. So you have to wonder, is he truly a difference-making running back? So you're going to see right now, depending on what source you use, Jonathan Taylor's anywhere from RB3, RB4, RB5 in Dynasty. But he's a top 5 consensus running back in Dynasty. And yes, that's warranted because of his pedigree. That's warranted with what he's done in the past. But the reality is he's in his 4th year. He does have some wear and tear. He came off a pretty significant injury last year. And we're getting to a point where, and I've said this on many videos before, a running back should not have value past the first couple years of their rookie contract. That is when they are most sought out at the market. And that is also when the prime production for them is going to occur. So we're here in year 4 with Jonathan Taylor, and the production is now in question, right? Whether he actually plays a full season is in question. Whether he plays that much at all is in question. So at the peak, and we're probably even past the peak a little bit, because you could argue that his peak was year 2 and year 3. So now we're slightly past the peak, going into a contract year, and you're questioning what his potential production can be. So you have to ask yourself, even if he does play, what is my trading away if I'm moving off of Jonathan Taylor? So I'm going to give you a little bit of data on Jonathan Taylor. Now, this is for his career, and this is just encompassing every game that he has played. So obviously it's skewed a little bit by his early numbers when he was in a platoon backfield. You remember his rookie year, he struggled to get on the field for the first 8 weeks or so. But for his career, Jonathan Taylor has averaged 0.872 PPR points per opportunity. 0.872 PPR points per opportunity. He has gotten an average of 20.6 opportunities per game in his career. That translates to about 17.9 fantasy points per game. Now, across the course of a season, the last 3 years, that would have finished RB6, RB8, and RB5. So he would not even have finished inside the top 4 with those career numbers over the past couple years. Now, does that mean he can't finish higher? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you take his career average and maybe you bump that up just a little bit because of the skewed numbers from his rookie year. But even in 2022, if you just give him the benefit of the doubt and you say, let's give him 18.5 PPR points per game, maybe even 19. Last year, that would have been good for RB5. In 2021, if you take those same numbers, again, 18.5 PPR points per game, that would have been good for RB4. 2020 was his rookie year. You give him 18.5 points per game, that would have been good for right around RB5. So what are you taking away here, right? He's valued at RB3, 4, 5 in Dynasty. And his career numbers, even if you give him the benefit of the doubt, bumped up a little bit from his rookie year. Based on his efficiency thus far, he probably doesn't even project to be a top 3 running back. Now, you bring in the warp chart and you look at the wins above replacement or wins over replacement in a lineup league when you're looking at this format. So we'll just do a 12-team super flex start 10. And you look at where that runs right around RB4, RB5. You're talking about pretty flat warp. If you just look at RB5 from last year, it's pretty flat. RB5, RB6, not that different than RB12. So the reality is this: Jonathan Taylor is a top 5 running back if I had to rank right now. But when you factor in all these other things, the holdout issue, the injury from last year, the fact that there's a huge risk that even if he does come back, he doesn't hold out, he doesn't throw away his salary. The Colts have said they're not trading him. It feels like the Colts are so dug in here that they're sending a message with this Jonathan Taylor situation. They're not going to kowtow for, potentially moving him just because he wants. And if you look at, I don't want to dive too deep into this, otherwise the video will go 20 minutes. But if you look at the comp pick formula and you look at what the Colts would get if they let Jonathan Taylor go in free agency, if you base that on, because it's based on the contract that he gets when he hits free agency, they're going to probably get like a 4th or 5th round pick value contributed to their comp pick formula. What happens is they take all the players you've lost, they throw them into a calculation, and they give you essentially credit towards a pick. And once you hit that number, you end up getting that comp pick. So the Colts would get credit for like a 4th or 5th round pick for Jonathan Taylor, right? So they're automatically going to get that, even if he gets signed to a similar deal as Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, or Jamal Williams. All 3 of those contracts were credited as 4th or 5th round picks towards the team that lost them. And that's what Taylor's going to be. Most likely, unless he just blows it out of the water on the open market, which I don't think he will, that's probably going to be the compensation. And I don't see a team giving up more than that for Jonathan Taylor. A team's not going to give up a 2nd. A team's not going to give up a 3rd. Those are day 2 picks. Teams value those super highly, especially if they say, oh man, I can draft a running back who's on a cheap contract with one of those picks. And I think that's the argument. This is why the Colts wouldn't trade him. Because say somebody offers them a 4th round pick. They're not going to accept a 4th round pick when there's a very good chance they get the comp pick in the formula close to that. Why would they accept that trade now and cater to the player? And I'm not anti-player here. I'm just looking at it from the Colts perspective. They have no incentive to let a player like this force his way out of town for a very, very minimal return. And that's the reality. So he's not going to go anywhere. They're not going to trade him unless a team comes in with a 2nd round pick or something like that. Not going to happen because guess what? The reason he was at odds with Indianapolis to begin with is he wanted an extension. So you would not only need a team that's willing to essentially pay off the Colts to essentially say, hey, I'll give you enough to where you will go against your belief in what you want to do with this player to accept the pick. And that team that gives away the pick probably has to be willing to pay Jonathan Taylor what he wants. Otherwise, he's going to arrive in the new destination and be in the same spot he was this offseason with the Colts. This is, I think, a stark slap in the face for a lot of dynasty managers. Running backs don't matter when they get outside of their first couple years. It's going to be the same in a year or 2 with Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs. When they're going into year 3, that's the peak. When they're going into year 4, maybe year 5, the peak has passed. Their production can still be good. Eckler, McCaffrey, Barkley, all these guys are good on their 2nd contracts. Don't get me wrong. Their production can still be good. But once you get to where Jonathan Taylor is right now, and it's accelerated because of these issues these guys are having with their contracts when they're coming up to free agency, that is past the peak point of where you hold the valuable asset. So sure, you could try to move Jonathan Taylor. My advice, if I have him, I would do anything I could to pivot up to Jahmyr Gibbs, pivot up to Bijan Robinson, pivot up to Breece Hall. But I think that window is gone. It's going to cost you a lot more to do that than it's going to be to just hold Jonathan Taylor and hope the best happens. You're better off actually going downwards. You're better off pivoting to a lesser running back that has some risk, no doubt. There's some risk in any running back you pivot that's below Jonathan Taylor. But if I can go to Travis Etienne, if I can go to Ramondre Stevenson, I don't care if I go to an older player, somebody like Josh Jacobs or Nick Chubb. I mean, there's different risks with different guys. But at this point, I hold no actual longevity dynasty value in Jonathan Taylor. And unfortunately, this is going to be a hard lesson for a lot of people that have invested high on running backs, expecting them, oh man, I'm going to get 5 or 6 years out of this guy. You've gotten 2 out of Jonathan Taylor. Year 3 ended with an injury. The first half of his rookie year, he wasn't usable. So we've essentially gotten about 1.5 to 2 years worth of peak production. You had a first-round startup pick on your hands, and now you have somebody that you're questioning what to do for with the rest of this season. So make some pivots. I think you can be creative. There is not too little you can really accept for Taylor if you're getting the right structure of a deal. Can I pivot down for another running back plus another starter? So you're sitting at a point where you don't want to have too much value stuck into Jonathan Taylor's prior market because it's never going to recover.